Welcome to Living Outside the Matrix, a philosophy show for thinking people. My name's Nigel Howitt, and on the show today we're going to return to this subject of the cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. In the mainstream media, of course, the main message is that Bitcoin's dead in the water and cryptos are a thing of the past, but nothing could be further from the truth. There are a number of good reasons to keep up on this topic. Joining me to discuss it is Pugh of New Kids on the Blockchain. A great pleasure to be joined today by this fantastic gentleman who's got his finger on the pulse, I would say, with his wonderful weekly show and news update on YouTube, which no doubt we'll hear about. So, Ashley, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and a very warm welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Lovely to have a chat. I mean, obviously, cryptocurrencies, incredibly interesting world, very volatile world. I guess a bit of a quick potted history about myself. I'm a feature film documentary maker. So I've got like 20 years in the industry as a sort of TV producer and filmmaker. And myself and my girlfriend, who's my co-host on the show, we've been producing a number of feature documentaries. And I got into cryptocurrencies about 2 years ago. It was probably end of 2016, actually. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. I touched on Bitcoin a few times in like 2013, 14. Didn't buy any, unfortunately, wish I had. But it was just too difficult. I mean, I remember sitting in pubs with friends trying to work out how to, and it was just, whew. And then, of course, the YouTube channel started popping up explaining how to actually do stuff. And I bought my first bit of Bitcoin. And I thought, wow, this is interesting. I did a £10 purchase of Bitcoin and then immediately sold it and immediately bought it back just to see how the process worked. And it worked. It appeared. It disappeared. I think I made £3 in the first transaction in about 10 minutes. So I thought that was good. And then I just thought, this is really interesting. Started filming some people around the time. And before we knew it, we were producing a feature-length documentary, which is now called New Kids on the Blockchain, A Journey to the Heart of Cryptocurrency in the ICO Boom. We've been filming that for 2 years now, and over the course of that time, we've been invited to events all over the world, spoke to some of the leading people from all different aspects of it, and it's put us in a really unique position to be filming from the inside out. A lot of documentaries you see of like Netflix looking in or banking on Bitcoin looking in, some very good documentaries, but where we have a unique viewpoint is we've been filming with ICOs like Pillar, for example. We filmed from the start, all the process of going through the ICO, what's happened, the tumultuous year they've had, the release of their wallet. And we decided, well, we were told about a year ago, you should really put out a YouTube channel because this space is moving so quickly. A documentary can often take 3 years to produce and make and get to it. And, 3 years in cryptocurrency is like 50 years in anything else. So we put out this weekly show, which is really to try and help inform people. There's this term of kind of crypto influencers, which I'm kind of a little bit against. We want to be crypto informers. There's a lot of channels out there that are like, buy this coin, it's going to the moon, do this, You're going to get rich. And, a lot of people, that was going on a lot in 2017. But what we're trying to do is give people a bit of information. We don't know everything, but we're in a very unique position of having speed dial of a lot of people on the inside of what's going on. Yeah. So it gives us a really interesting perspective. And it's been a crazy couple of years, to be honest.
It certainly has. We'll get on to that. But I just wanted to remind any listeners out there, there are a few very good reasons to keep up on this topic. The first one being that this is technology is not going away anytime soon. This is a major development, if you like, of technology, and much like the arrival of the internet. And although with the price crash and all this that you'll no doubt tell us about, the journey of last year, and there's this general perception that it's all over, this technology is not going away anytime soon, and it's going to be a part of our futures, whether we know about it today or not, and whether we choose to inform ourselves about it or not. So this is quite an important point, and I would like to add to that the more we can educate ourselves about it, the more we find out and familiarize ourselves, as you mentioned, getting used to that, the process of using it and sending a Bitcoin here, or buying a token, ERC20 token there, getting used to the process is a big part of the familiarity, feeling comfortable with it. And the last point is that there's potentially big gains to be made here. So I'd just like to point that out to all of you out there who haven't perhaps considered buying any. You know, the art of making money is to buy low and sell high. And right now, cryptocurrencies are at a low. So let's roll on then, Ash. And from your perspective that you've just outlined, it was an exciting yet in somewhat depressing year in cryptos for a lot of us. I was a latecomer into the technology, similar experiences to you. How would you describe in general 2017 as a snapshot?
So 2017 was an incredible year. I mean, you had, all of this amount of cash injection just went into the space. The ICO was a very new thing with initial coin offering, which is where you actually can purchase these tokens. What used to happen traditionally is people would have to raise an IPO. It was very complicated. If you had a business idea and you wanted to raise money, you had to go to the big money people. It was complicated. It was only available to accredited investors. It basically reduced it down to the 1% being able to get involved. What was so amazing about ICOs is it just said anybody can get involved. If you've got $500 and you want to be involved in XYZ token, you can just send us some Ethereum and we'll give you the tokens. And so it was almost like crowdfunding, the whole kind of Kickstarter thing. ICOs was really like Kickstarter, in my opinion, for cryptocurrencies. Somebody could say, I've got this great idea. I want to do a wallet that is about data privacy. If they've got a strong enough community and everybody puts $1,000 in, all of a sudden they've got enough money to build the project and they build it and deliver it. So that was the upside. Fantastic opportunity, especially for open source projects, because open source projects normally can't get private investment because they go to them. And of course, private investors want to know everything's patented, locked up and belong to them. But open source projects, of which a lot of cryptocurrencies are. A lot of people don't realize this, but Ethereum's an open source project. Projects like Pillar are open source. Loads of them are, sort of open source projects. So it opened the floodgates for people to get involved. The initial stages of 2017, some of those gains were astronomical. People were buying a token for 1 cent, and it was being released on on an exchange a couple of months later for $1. They were making like 100 times returns, sometimes thousands times returns. I think one of the ones that we were involved in was Populous, which was like 25 cents when it came out. When it hit the market, it was $3.50, I think. And then within 3 months, it was $60. So crazy returns. So obviously that encouraged people to just go. Everybody was getting into it. It was still very technical. So it wasn't totally mainstream. I would say it was people who were, libertarians who were interested in that space, people with a bit of technology knowledge who were interested in that space. And then the YouTube influencers came in, and all of a sudden there were tons of videos. You can buy this coin by doing this. Yeah, and I followed some of them, and it was hugely complicated.
The usability was a huge stumbling block, wasn't it, to start off with? The difficulty of actually, you think, okay, I'd like to buy a Bitcoin or whatever coin, and the challenge around achieving it was enormous, wasn't it? It's gotten a lot easier now. But sorry, carry on.
Yeah, that was a really good point. And this is one of the big barriers to mainstream adoption, which I'll sort of come back to. But so 2017, all this money came in. All you needed to raise money for an ICO was a white paper, which is the term for your what I'm going to do. A white paper might say, we're going to create Ash and Nigel coin, and by the end of next year, we'll have created it. And what we're planning to do is this, and this is how it will work. And this is the amount of money we need. Yeah. So really, all you needed was a space age looking website, a white paper, a few names on there, and people could not get their money in fast enough. The Ethereum network could not handle the amount of money that was coming in at certain points. So you had this incredible run up in 2017. And a lot of the people we were filming, really intelligent economists and people on the inside, said this isn't sustainable. Yes, this may be the most incredible technology ever, but this sort of increase isn't sustainable. Also, there was thousands of scams. When you've got desperate people trying to put their money into anything they can, there's this whole notion of FOMO, fear of missing out, which is one of the kind of, there's a lot of terms in crypto like FOMO, FUD, which is fear, uncertainty and doubt, and all these different sort of acronyms. But FOMO, people just could not get their money in quick enough, and people were getting scammed left and right. And we finished the end of 2017 with the market being worth about 850 billion, I think, when it had started at about 80. So a huge run up. And everybody went into 2018 thinking, bingo, here we go. It's going to keep going. It's going to keep going. And sure enough, as with anything like that, as these projects started to need to spend the Ethereum that they'd raised, that money had to come out of the, not bubble, but I mean, a lot of people are calling it a bubble because a lot of money went in, it inflated, and then it came out and deflated. But a lot of people were raising Ethereum, and then they've got an office to run for a year. They've got staff to pay. Now, those things aren't payable in Ethereum, so people had to withdraw that Ethereum out. So all of a sudden, all this demand comes out, and there's this sort of crash down.
A lot of people won't appreciate that, and they'll just think that the fashion has passed, it's passé. But that's a really good takeaway point: the fact that people needed bills to pay to fund those development teams, and I gather a lot of very significant development has been taking place, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean the all of those costs needed to be. People have gone into it and said, right, we've got 2 years to create this project. It's going to cost X, and there was a whole different story there, which is, with Ethereum being so volatile, a lot of these companies raised the money and thought they had 2 years to make their product. And then when Ethereum dropped by 90%, that money they had dropped by 90% as well. Yep. So we've seen, as we've gone into 2018, a lot of that money's come out. And as it's been coming out, people have been panicking and selling out more and more and more because they're trying to pay their bills and they're thinking, shit, is this going to go even lower and lower and lower? Also, you had another big factor, which was EOS, which was one of the big ICOs that was launched for a new blockchain. And they did a year-long ICO where they raised $4 billion. Wow. Now, since they launched to mainnet, which was last year, they've been selling that 4 billion Ethereum off, and fairly quickly. So at any time, for the market to stay where it is, you've got EOS selling off 4 billions worth of Ethereum, all these other companies selling it off. And that's what's caused a lot of these kind of coins to disappear, and essentially just they haven't been able to continue operating. Most of the people we spoke to last year said, in 2017, bear in mind 90% of these projects will fail. Like any business, you're very lucky if 1 in 20 businesses survives. But this is also a turbo-induced version of that, where timescales are rapidly condensed. So going into 2018, as the market started dropping and just continued to drop and continue to drop, everybody got scared. The mainstream press were like, that's the end of it. It's all over. Famous economists like Nouriel Roubini, Dr. Doom said, yep, we told you it was going to happen. And it's not the end by any stretch. 2018 was about building. What a lot of people don't realize is a lot of the strong projects have spent a year building infrastructure, networks, roads that will allow people on and off, wallets that make it easy for people to buy in fiat currency and switch between. And a lot of that is kind of invisible to the mainstream. But from the inside perspective we've seen a lot of these next generation blockchains like EOS, like Cardano, all of these ones that are starting to come to fruition now. And EOS, for example, is, to a lot of people who don't know much about it, they don't understand what's going on. But if you look into the statistics, it's outperforming Ethereum. It's growing rapidly. It's going to become, in my opinion, one of the next generation blockchains. And what will happen is there will be, over the course of this year, there will be a number of blockchains which become the de facto ones, like train tracks. And you will have these future train tracks that all the new tokens will run on. Yeah. And that's kind of what's been happening, I think, over 2018. And it's been quite a depressing time if you're looking at prices. But if you're looking at what's actually been going on and what's been built and delivered, then it's a very exciting time for the right projects. For the 90% of ones that weren't very good, they're going to go away. And I've got a fair few of those in my portfolio as well, to be fair. So,
Indeed. Well, it's good to remind ourselves that that it isn't all about price. And another one of those pressures, and that's a really useful insight, that the pressure of funding the ongoing research and development, because the other factor is that it's a question of who's got the best idea, who has actually come up with a really good either a platform or the use case, who's come up with some functionality that can really serve the public and will therefore be more likely to be adopted. So there's this fierce competition, isn't there, between which is actually functionally the better coin or token or platform. So there are, and as you said, a lot of them will fall away by the wayside. The scams will all disappear, and we'll be hopefully left, and it's in everyone's interest that we are left with a few really good functional use case coins.
Yeah, I think there's another sort of factor to consider as well, is that if you think back to the old VHS versus Betamax back in the sort of 70s and 80s, Betamax basically was a much better product, but it didn't win out. VHS did because it had better marketing. So at the moment, you've got some blockchains, one of which is Tron. A lot of people believe Tron is nowhere near as good as some of these other ones, but their marketing is incredible. So they are, they're kind of doing very well there. And you may find that even though, some people say XYZ blockchain is the best, it may be technically, but if they don't have the marketing and adoption that the other blockchain has, you might find that a VHS wins over a Betamax. So I think if you are going to invest in this space, be very careful about what you look into, and it's, don't put all your eggs in one basket. I mean, I'm not trying to offer up any investment advice here, but from my own perspective, it's because of how volatile it is and because of how fast moving it is, going all in cryptocurrency is not the move. I think it's the kind of investment where you should only use a very small amount of money that you can afford to lose, and you should spread that amount of money across different projects, because there is a strong chance that several of those might die, but the ones that survive might become the next Amazon or Google of the future. It's an asymmetric investment. It only takes one of the 10 that you invest in, if you choose the right 10, to be one of the future ones, and your investment would, in my opinion, be more than tenfold on it. So there's a lot of kind of information around there, and there are a lot of good sources for information. Chris Coney, Cryptoverse, a friend of ours, very good, very grounded guy, very intelligent. And there's lots of crazy channels that just you should avoid like the plague, where they're just telling you to buy a coin tomorrow because it's going to make thousands, and steer clear of all of that stuff and try and think about, what is this blockchain trying to solve? Who are the team behind it? And is it likely to be one that becomes a blockchain of the future? And, get good information and good knowledge. There is plenty out there, but don't get too caught up in you must buy this coin now because it's going to double by tomorrow, because that stuff is a route to potential disaster.
Sure. It's interesting, isn't it, how you've just enlightened us about how Ethereum was involved in the devaluation when measured against the fiat currencies that we use. But as Bitcoin came down last year, I've heard a lot of people say that Bitcoin really is sort of the anchor point, and as Bitcoin comes down, it sort of brings everything down with it. I wasn't quite so aware of the Ethereum factor there that you've just shared with us. But we reached a low measured in dollars of about $3,200 for Bitcoin. So is the general consensus now that we've bottomed out, do you think?
I mean, it's so difficult. I mean, we did a video a couple of weeks ago where we showed all the clips of what all the experts were saying going into 2018. And it was all like, Bitcoin's 50,000 by the end of this year, 40,000 by the end. And it's this montage. And then going back to them at 6 months, do you still hold good for your 50,000? Yeah, 50,000. And then obviously the only thing you could rely on at the end of last year is that everything was unreliable. There is a lot of thought at the moment that we have potentially bottomed, but there are some quite renowned crypto economists saying that they think the bottom could be 2,000 and it could go down still. But I think if you're going to go into this type of space, you need to buy things and hold on to them. I mean, there are people who trade, obviously, and they do very well with it. We know some of them ourselves. And that's not my kind of world, really. I'm not sitting there every day looking at prices going up and down. I'm looking at projects and thinking, is this something that's going to change the future? Is this something that's going to revolutionize banking, content, factoring, or any kind of specific things? And you touched on it before also with adoption. In order for mainstream adoption, this has got to get a lot easier to use. And there are lots of products that have been developed in 2018. One example is the Pillar wallet, which is a really simple wallet that you have on your iPhone that is completely they've been all the way through with hackers and everybody. They say it's one of the safest systems you can have. And rather than saying, I want to send a Bitcoin to X42793 _, I can just say, Nigel, and you're in my address book, and I can say, send Nigel $100 of Bitcoin, boom, and it sends it, and I can message you to say, hey, Nigel, have you got that Bitcoin? And you can message me back, and it's removed a whole layer of that complication. So I think if somebody hasn't put their toe into the water yet, I would go and download the Pillar wallet. It's free. And it just takes a lot of the stress out of it. You can't actually buy cryptocurrencies on it yet. You can only hold them and move them around, but they're going to get to the point where you can transact and stuff on there as well. When my dad can easily purchase Ethereum and a Bitcoin, then I think it's going to be a different story. At the moment, I can just about get him to send an email. So it might take a while.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two real factors on there or motives for people to get in. There's the potential investment, but I think almost more importantly, it's getting used to the technology and as I found, I was drawn to the coins, the tokens, where I saw a really useful use case. As you say, good functionality and something that can, for example, help the unbanked join, in the financial game of exchange and wealth creation. There's billions of people out there that don't have bank accounts, and the potential for economic growth through these use cases is really quite exciting. So that's one of the factors, and maybe it's a good idea to separate the what's it called, the sort of punting, the speculative part of one's investment, to the backing a horse that you think, yep, this has a really sound user case, and I think this could change the future. So, and I've done a bit of both, and I'm sure a lot of people do as well. But where do you see the coming year then, Ash? I know no one has a crystal ball, but any insight? Just polish it off. where do you see things going in your best guess?
I don't think we're going to see the kind of explosive gains that we saw in 2017 again. I think what I'm hoping that we're going to see sustainable growth. I think the biggest problem at the moment is the market is very heavily manipulated. There are, in terms of Bitcoin, for example, most of them are owned by large volume by a very small amount of people. Okay, they're called whales in this game, and there are a bunch of whales that own huge volumes of tokens, and they can collude to drop prices. All it's got to take is 10 Bitcoin whales that have got 1,000 Bitcoins each. And there are some people that have, tens of millions of Bitcoin. So at the moment, a very large percentage of Bitcoin is held by a very small amount of people. The ideal solution would be that Bitcoin was held across a much wider sort of demographic. Also, you have the Bitcoin miners, which also have a huge influence in what's going on, and they can manipulate that market. So one of the reasons I'm interested with EOS, for example, is they did this year-long ICO in order to distribute the tokens across as wide a pool as possible, to stop people being able to come in and just take huge volumes. Right, they did a 365-day, effectively 365 ICOs, to make sure that it's spread across. Now, you will still find that people hold more tokens than others, but everybody gets a vote for every token they have on EOS. So it's a real kind of community aspect where the community determine what's happening with what's going on. So back to your point, I think over this year, I think there's going to be continued development. There will be continued falling away of shitcoins, projects that weren't any good and were never really going to deliver. Probably some projects that were very good, but unfortunately with the price compression of Ethereum, they just couldn't finish their roadmap in time with the money it had available. And I think you'll get to the end of the year with a number of projects which are, strong and starting to deliver. And I think at the moment, if you were looking to invest in things, my personal take is investing in blockchains as opposed to tokens on them. So
that's the train tracks, yeah.
Exactly.
Your analogy, yeah.
Yeah, the train tracks.
The platform.
So, some examples of that were, Ethereum is still considered, the best because it's got the longest in the game. It's very slow is the problem, and it's not as scalable, but they're hoping to solve that with some updates. You've got EOS, which, I'm a big fan of, and a lot of people that we speak to are as well. Tron is another one. Cardano, Ontology. There are a number of them. Neo, and these guys now have been building for 18 months or so, and they're starting to deliver. And I think what will happen is the ones that deliver will be the ones that come out in 2020 really firing.
Okay, well, that's an interesting point because in that question, where are we going in this year? How, let's relate that to the developers. I mean, one example springs to mind. Arc, for example, they've done a lot of development behind the scenes, and they're if not fully functionally ready, they are certainly a lot more ready than they were through last year. Is the space ripe, if you like, for a particular token or a platform that is ready to actually sort of get out there? I mean, to me, it doesn't quite seem that we're there, does it? Because public awareness is still pretty small, isn't it? It's in its infancy still. There seems to be yet another area where we've got to break through into greater public awareness before even these platforms and tokens that are ready with a use case. They might have, the developers are all done. Here we go. It's ready to roll out. Just do this with your iPhone. But if there isn't the public awareness, would you agree that's sort of another factor that needs to be addressed, doesn't it? It's not just all about price when we look ahead into the year.
One of the interesting things that somebody said to me recently, which I think was a really valid point, is blockchain will really take off in the mainstream once people don't realize they're using blockchain. Now, the analogy they used was back to the internet. Before Netscape Navigator and some of those early interfaces, if you wanted to use the internet, it was HTTP/this, that, do that. And then all of a sudden they put this browser on the front end and anybody could use it. And then obviously as things have developed, Google Chrome, everything's just got easier and easier. We're currently at the stage of blockchain in relation to internet where we don't have a browser and everything being done is having to be, now a lot of those browsers have been currently built and sort of delivered onto things. So if we see that start moving forward and people don't realize that they're even doing that, then I think that's when it starts getting really interesting. General public just goes onto something and they just use it, and there's no need to think about, am I using blockchain?
No, absolutely, yes. So we're kind of at the stage where the internet browsers can be likened to all these platforms and coins and the technology that's currently being developed. So the user, we've got to be able to just pick up our phone, as you say, and almost not even know that we not even know the technical aspects behind the technology, and just simply push a few buttons. I mean, that does make perfect sense, really.
There's a term for it, and it's called blockchain in the background. Right. And apparently when we hit blockchain in the background, that will be my dad buys something. He doesn't realize that it's been paid in, that's using a blockchain-based system. He might realize by that point that it's been paid in cryptocurrency, but all of those complicated gubbins at the moment that we have to execute with smart contracts and use this to send that, to do this, that will all be, eradicated. And once somebody puts that together, there will be a way of making life a lot easier. There's certain things at the moment like Bancor protocol, which is allowing you to buy tokens across blockchains. So they've created something where if you've got a bunch of Ethereum tokens, you could just buy EOS tokens and it will do the switch between it. So that's one example of, making it work between blockchains. But the bigger example is you just logging into your blockchain browser and saying, I want to buy a Bitcoin, sell that, have a bit of this, pay my power utility through something like MWatt or one of these different blockchains there. And then it just becomes something that is as simple as firing up Google and doing a search for cinema times. Yeah,
great stuff. So when we look at examples such as Venezuela, obviously big crises going on in Venezuela at the moment, with the collapse of their economy under the socialist influence. A lot of people were looking to Venezuela as an example of, let's just watch now and see how the cryptocurrencies dive in there and help the situation in terms of facilitating economic exchange and so forth, where there's hyperinflation. Do you have any insight on that use case sort of developmental aspect?
I mean, I know in sort of circumstances like that, people have found that holding on to cryptocurrency has helped them avoid the hyperinflation because, but that they've been able to hold on to something. And also it's very easy for somebody who is, like you were saying before, unbanked or in areas where they're not as used to that whole banking system to, if they've got a mobile phone, you can transact with cryptocurrency. And, there was a study that I was looking at recently with the unbanked. A huge percentage of the unbanked do have mobile phones. So one of the quickest routes, into solving that problem is cryptocurrencies on that. And I think there were a lot of examples in Venezuela where you were seeing increased cryptocurrency use, throughout there to try and get through it. And other examples I heard about were when there was the last hurricane in the States and there was all sorts of emergency problems. People were trying to send money and it was so slow to send the money that Dash put together a system, and they were actually sending cryptocurrencies and moving money around to help emergency victims because it was so slow to try and send funds that they had this whole fund that was literally just getting money to people immediately that were in dire need to get them out of emergency situations. So I think that the speed of, SWIFT banking system, it's still quicker to get on a plane today and take the money to where you go than it is to do the SWIFT banking. That's a quote I've stolen from David Siegel, but he said it to me the other day, and it's so true. It's 3 days, and somebody else said to me, if you owe somebody $80 and you want to send it overseas, and they're going to charge you $60 to send it. Now, where's the sense in that? There is fear from the mainstream that this is going to give too much power back to the people, and there is a lot of kind of deep state conspiracies sort of going on about where is this all leading. And there are coins like Ripple, XRP that a lot of people think are bankers' blockchains, and a lot of the kind of die-hard cryptocurrency people steer clear of those type of cryptocurrencies.
I've heard it said that Ripple could be the new Bitcoin. It could, usurp Bitcoin, if you like, as being the number one. Do you think there's any merit in that thought? Is that a potential?
I think it's got potential for huge banking adoption. A lot of stuff I've been reading recently said it could actually become the new SWIFT. The problem people have with it is a lot of people that came into cryptocurrency came into it from an anarcho kind of capitalist perspective, that they wanted to take back control of money and have something that wasn't able to be hyperinflated and that they could control. And the problem with Ripple is it's very much the bank creating something they want. There's not a finite supply of them. They can so as an investment, it may be a great thing. I personally am not going near it because it's not something that I'm particularly interested in, but I'm sure that there is a potential for money to be made off buying and holding on to them.
So Ripple doesn't have a finite number of coins like Bitcoin. You mentioned earlier, just to correct that point, you mentioned that some people had tens of millions of Bitcoin. I think you probably meant tens of millions of
millions
of dollars worth. So 21 million is the total number of Bitcoin. There's no total number of Ripple. Then they can just keep creating more, can they?
There is I'm not an expert on Ripple, but there is a consideration that it doesn't have the same finite kind of capacity that certain coins do, and as a result, it has the ability to be manipulated.
Sure. So just on that subject of manipulation, there is one sort of camp, if you like, that suggests that the powers that shouldn't be might be controlling the whole crypto space, and it's widely considered it's widely acknowledged that a cashless society is a desired goal for the establishment. The war on cash. Have you seen any evidence from your perspective and the people that you've spoken to? Do you think there's any real hard evidence that the crypto space is sort of owned, not lock, stock and barrel, but largely by, the influence of the state or the powers that shouldn't be? Do you think there's anything in that?
I think anytime there is big money involved in any way, shape or form, I'm sure you can see the hands of the deep state sort of all over it. But if you look at, obviously Bitcoin came about in the first instance, as a sort of response to this, and was created by this mysterious Satoshi character that nobody knows who it is. There have been lots of conspiracies that he may have been somebody deep state. There's been all sorts of names kind of listed of who that may be, but essentially it was created to combat that. Now, whether along the line other blockchains have been created that are controlled by, or there is some conspiracy to create one cashless coin that rules them all to move us across from the banking system. You could go down that rabbit hole for for many weeks. I'm sure there's lots of kind of theories about it, but
Sure.
all I've seen over the last year is lots of big money coming into this space. We go to lots of events, and you've got lots of big banks getting involved. You've got lots of big legal companies like PricewaterhouseCoopers getting involved from their side of things, and Accenture, and big money's coming in. And when big money like that comes in, there's always, I'm sure, a danger that that some of that money might not be as pure as it was intended to be at the start with Bitcoin's philosophy. But I certainly haven't seen kind of any damning proof that it is, and I've seen lots of kind of examples of where cryptocurrency has helped the more anarcho-capitalist side, which I'm more akin to.
Yeah, it was interesting last year to see so many articles coming out with good news in terms of institutional, not adoption, but institutional investment, not just with money, but coming on board. There was story after story, wasn't there, if you like, and yet the price carried on going down.
Yeah.
But so it does look inevitable, doesn't it? That when we bear in mind the amount of official institutions, as you mentioned, PricewaterhouseCoopers, etc., when you see all these people, getting interested in this space, it is a sign that it's not going away anytime soon, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where if certainly on the banking side, if they don't adopt this soon and find a way to use it for their benefit, it will certainly work against them. And I think that's what you're seeing with Ripple, especially. That's really become the bankers' kind of coin, and I think that will be the one that they really adopt.
What about with the privacy coins? PivX, MadeSafe, Zcash, and these others. Do you think that they're really as private, and will they offer some kind of private transaction that's genuinely private in the future? Do you think that's a reality, or is that wishful thinking?
I think first on that point is that a lot of people don't even realize they think Bitcoin is anonymous, and it's completely not. I was speaking to a company called Tax Token in the States, and they were telling me there's an agency now that the tax office out there are working with that are a forensic Bitcoin analyst, and they will basically look at Bitcoin transactions and find where it came from. So the first thing is, lots of these cryptocurrencies are not private. So that's one thing people should be aware of. Yeah, the so-called privacy coins, also, you shouldn't take it for granted that they are completely private. So some of them are, like you say, and we've had conversations, and we've actually got videos on our channel with PivX, with Cloak, with Monero, a bunch. There's a whole playlist on privacy coins, so it's worth a look. And they work in the same way to kind of, Onion Network Tor browser. They just divide up everything into layers and send those layers everywhere. That's hard to put back together again. And I think it's kind of privacy has been added to a lot of coins as we move along, and I think it's something that people want. There is, lots of talk about, every blockchain having private versions. There was PrivEOS. Somebody was talking about coming to EOS soon, and Bitcoin private and all these different ones. So there are solutions to privacy and fungibility there. Good. For sure.
Because it is a fundamental issue, isn't it? As you said, amongst the sort of libertarians and the anarcho-capitalists, but really for everybody, because the state and the central banks naturally can be seen to have a vested interest in us not having a private, direct, peer-to-peer, non-traceable means of exchange, a means of value exchange. They've got a direct vested interest in seeing everyone's exchange. So there's a real conflict there, isn't there? The average person like you and me, it's in our interest to be able to quietly and discreetly exchange value between ourselves. The fundamental sort of core principle of the original Bitcoin, as I understood it. So there is this conflict, isn't there?
There is, for sure, and I think it's nations especially are terrified of capital flight. I mean, that's why China banned ICOs in the first stage when it happened in 2017, and they were just terrified that all of a sudden this money could just leave the nation without any control of what's happening with it. And I think that as regulation starts coming in more, you're going to see back to 2017 there was no AML or KYC, which is anti-money laundering and know your customer rules on most of these coins. Mm-hmm. You could just get your private my Ether wallet of Ethereum, send 5 Ether to XYZ coin, and those coins arrived. Now, companies have realized since that they're in a terrible hole, because without know your customer and anti-money laundering, they are now responsible to prove where all that money's come from. So that's another big problem a lot of those companies are having. If you now want to purchase a coin or token or cryptocurrency, you are going to have to do an extensive round of KYC and AML. For any of the big exchanges, it's like holding your passport, or with a picture of you with stuff and bank accounts and details and checking. There are still some decentralized exchanges, DEXs, and where you can just go and trade and you don't need to do that. But big exchanges like Binance, for example, you're not going to be able to get money on or off that, or Coinbase, until you've gone through a whole round of letting them know who you are, and all of your details. So the Wild West has been slightly tamed. It was like Red Dead Redemption in 2017, but it has become slightly better. There is always a way around stuff, because hackers and technical people are very clever at this stuff. But the people are getting wise to it, and people are realizing a lot of ICOs are now being brought to task on stuff. There's been lots of cases where they have been shut down, or they've been fined, or Paragon was a big one in the States, which was one of the first ones that got done. And the SEC is going for a lot of these ICOs now. And I think you're going to find over this year also a lot of these ICOs that were launched in 2017 are going to be shut down by the SEC and fined. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting year.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for all of those insights, looking back and looking forward. With regards to your documentary, Ash, when do you foresee perhaps bringing that, releasing that?
I hope that we're going to get it out about middle of this year. The problem we've had is every time I thought we've had the story, the whole world's changed, the cryptocurrency world. So I've had to restore it. We've got the first hour cut now, which is working really well. And it's a 3-part structure. Part 1 is the ICO. This is the most amazing thing ever. Act 2 is what the hell just happened. And Act 3 is where we go from here. So we're kind of on the where we go from here bit at the moment. But the problem, of course, is we don't know. So it will probably end with a question more than an answer.
You ventured into a once a day news. Have you dropped that idea now completely, Ash, or is that just obviously we're in a situation where when prices are very low, people's interest tends to sort of follow the price of Bitcoin, doesn't it? And we've seen to a certain extent mainstream interest, obviously being led by the mainstream, just sort of dissipating as the monetary price or the fiat currency equivalent price of the bit currencies declines. So does interest. So are you just sticking with your weekly show now, or how's that going?
Yeah, we tried doing a daily show every day. First of all, it was a huge amount of work, because I'm trying to, as always, we try and do production value that's more TV than web. So I kind of dug myself into a bit of hole there, where it became 3 hours every day of doing it. So I think we're going to concentrate on doing one weekly show and doing a really good polished show like we've been doing. Yep. But also we are teaming up with another channel to start doing a daily news online. So before long we'll announce that, and every day I'll be writing a piece with the top news stories, which people will be able to go to online and find all of that as well in between. So that's the sort of plan.
Fantastic. Well, that sounds great. Excellent. Well, look, thank you so much for your time today, Ash, and for sharing all your insights from your unique position and letting us know about New Kids on the Blockchain. Recommend everybody click on the YouTube there and subscribe to that fantastic weekly resource. I use it all the time. So thank you very much to all of you for listening as well, and I do urge you to visit the website lawfulrebel.com. Loads more need-to-know information there for subjects we really need to be familiar with so that we can thrive. So I do hope you'll join me again next week, or next time I should say, for another episode of Living Outside the Matrix.
To see.